if this is happening to the church,
yes,
and if the need for exorcisms has arisen 800%...
I know. You can picture our difficulty, Art.
Then
you've got the picture.
I picture a war underway, one that at least at present we don't seem to be winning.
That is about the lugubrious, the way you should state this very lugubrious fact. There is an intense war, and we are losing battle after battle. Now, we have a promise from Christ that ultimately we will win the war, or he will win it. But we're losing battle after battle, and it's obvious in everyday happenings, and it's obvious in the way our prelates and some of our priests are behaving, and in the dissolution of what was once a monolithic institution, an organization. Now, all the while I'm talking about the organization, Art. It's the actual organization.
Yes.
Once upon a time, it was the premier monolithic organization which withstood everything for 2,000 years. It is no longer there. We are in deep doo-doo. We really are. I make a joke about it because it's a very painful fact for me.
Such a fast fall, such a quick change.
It took nearly 30 years, ostensibly, since 1965, for this disruption to take place. But now we know that the rot, the change, started way back, at least 100 years ago. A real rot.
Is there a marker? Is there a point, or was there an occurrence that marked that change?
Yes. There was a meeting in Rome from 1962 to 1965 called the Second Vatican Council. A council in the church is a gathering in of all the bishops. And there were 2,800 bishops at that particular meeting for 3 years. They came for sessions in the autumn and the spring, each of those years, 62, 63, 64, and 65, under a pope called Pope John the 23rd. Fast, roly-poly, genial John the 23rd. The good Pope John, as they called him.
Yes.
And the result of that meeting was this sudden hurricane of change and abandonment of what had been done for 1,500 years. 1,500 years, Art. The change was so violent.
1,500 years.
And
Father, I've got an article here entitled "Two Eminent Churchmen Agree."
Yes.
That there actually is, this is a shocker to a lot of people.
Yes.
That there are satanic practices going on at the Vatican. Could that be true?
Yes.
You want to say that? If I was a lawyer and you were on the witness chair, I'd say, would you say it?
It's out loud, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. Now, when we say in the Vatican, it's at a certain level. And there's no doubt about it that there have been and still are practices that are formally venerating Lucifer, the prince of this world. There's no doubt about that. The Vatican itself has about 8 resident exorcists. And it uses those both there and in the 2 other cities that are devil-ridden in Italy, Milano and Torino. Milan and Turin. But there's no doubt about it that satanic or Luciferian practices, because it's really of the prince, and his name is Lucifer. It's really of the prince that these, in veneration of him and service of him, that these actions have taken place and do take place.
So, Father, is it because this is such a holy place that it makes it a number 1 target for Lucifer, or is it that there is a disease or a cancer within the Vatican? Makes it sound like Watergate.
I'll tell you what I think, Art. It is that amongst Luciferian organizations, there is a prophecy that if they can invade the citadel, and that's their name for the Vatican, they will have power for 1,000 years.
How close are they?
Very close. Very close.
I've heard about that 1,000
close.
years. I've heard about that 1,000 years.
Frighteningly close. And Only, I tell you quite honestly, to be quite frank with you, only Christ can save this organization, or can save the church, because the organization is shot, as far as I'm concerned. And I'm a very faithful Roman Catholic priest. But I know we're in, as I said before, to make it easy to hear it, we're in deep doo-doo. The current hedonism, the current corruption. And listen, in my own church art, in the Roman Catholic organization, we now have the spectacle in this country of the underground church.
The underground church?
Yeah.
What is that, Father?
Bishops, priests, chapels, nuns, schools that do not come within the scope of the normal diocese, all over the country. And by the way, I often say it, but it's true, if the American bishops, all 280 of them, knew how far the underground church had gone, they would have diarrhea.
Well, I'm having it just hearing that.
Oh, don't. Because it's a consoling fact. These are good people who decided that, like Mary Magdalene, they had taken away the body of the Lord and they couldn't find it. And they wanted valid priests to say valid masses and administer valid sacraments. And they don't want some person organizing them with enneagrams or promoting remote viewing in their sermons or advocating completely pornographic sex ed for their children in schools. Somebody said, no, we won't do that. We'll have our own homeschooling. We'll have our own chapels.
So are we close to a day, then, when everything is upside down and inside out, including the church?
That's the quickening. The church organization, yes. I always make that distinction out because there's this firm belief amongst Christians that the body of Christ, composed of those in His grace and the grace of Jesus, whether they're in heaven or in purgatory or on earth, but in a state of grace, that they form His church, as St. Paul calls it, His bride, without spot or wrinkle. Then there is the organization, the visible organization, supposed to incarnate that. At the present moment, that organization is going down. To our regret, it's going down. There are lots of good people in it, but as an organization, it's going down. It's like a wood with a forest dying out with fresh young saplings.
All
right, part two of this is a separate question.
Yes.
People have predicted the current pope will soon die,
Yes.
after which another pope will take control.
Yes.
The new pope has been predicted by some to be a dreaded betrayer of the faith, possibly involved in the coming of the Antichrist.
Yes.
How does Father Martin view the prophecy of the 111th pope, which would be the next pope?
Frankly, Art, the older I get, the less I know about it. I have a feeling in my bones that the miseries of the Roman Catholic organization as an organization, not simply as a spiritual church, but as an organization on the face of the earth, the miseries of that organization are just beginning, and that it is heading into a very difficult situation worldwide, and that there will be a lot of trouble in Rome itself. Now, as regards the health of the present Holy Father, it's very hard to know because he is a Polak, a stubborn man.
Oh, he is.
And he keeps on saying, no, despite all these prophecies, because he hears them, all these doomsayers, I'm going to see the year 2000, and I'm going to go to Mount Sinai in the year 2000, and I'm going to go to Ur of the Chaldees, where Abraham started in the year 2000. I'm going to go to Jerusalem and Bethlehem and Calvary.
Well, if he's determined, then he may well make it.
He may well make it. Always take into account the will of God. I do not know. Frankly, in spite of my name, which is biblical, for a prophet, Malachi, I have no gift of prophecy, Art, so I don't know. I have a great confidence that God, who so loved the world that He sent His only begotten Son to give us light, and light will take care of us. But I don't think it's going to be easy. I think miseries are going to start.
Father,
Does the Pope intend in that visit, if it is going to occur around the millennium, to try to bring together the three religions?
Art, his dream, and it's the only dream John Paul II has had. He never dreamt of controlling his bishops. He never dreamt of improving the condition of the religious orders. He never even dreamt of spreading Catholicism as a belief. His dream has always been to create a dynamic at the center of which would be Roman Catholics. Grouped around them would be the other Christian religions or sects or churches, Greeks and Russians and Western Protestantism. And grouped around them would be the Jewish people. And grouped around them would be the Muslims. His dream was to make out of that a dynamic the world would have to respect. And it's his dream.
Is it your dream?
No.
What do you think
what's going to happen
will come to pass if he lives long enough and tries this?
What will happen will be that the institutional organization of the church, as distinct from the people who live the life of the church, the supernatural life of the church, that organization will cease to be the house of Christ.
You know,
that's a very dire prophecy.
Yes, it is. You know, it's.
And it is my most recent, yes.
All right. Windswept House, I have not had an opportunity to read yet.
Mm-hmm.
But it's my understanding that it's kind of a. How would you describe it? As sort of a expose of the Vatican?
Yes, of the condition of the prelacy, the governors, the cardinals and bishops that govern this vast 1 billion plus member church, the Roman Catholic and Apostolic Church. It is a study of the condition of that organization as a world organization for spreading its gospel, its faith.
Is there a way that you can sort of give us a nutshell version of what you consider to be the condition of the church today?
Yes, there is. And let nobody sort of cavil at it in the difficult sense or the painful sense of the word, but listen to it because it seems to correspond with reality. And after all, in the matter of faith and religion, it is a matter of attaining what is there, the real. It is this, that the book really says, look, as far as organization goes, as an institution and an organization, the vast Roman Catholic Church is on the down slope. It is losing steadily and heavily, and over 2/3 of its members, that's 2/3 of 1 billion people, are being led into a form of belief which is irreconcilable with the traditional essence and outlook and belief of the Roman Catholic Church as it has been for almost 2 millennia.
In what way?
For over 30 years, the majority of the governors, the directors, the managers of this organization have been feeding a form of belief which is not Catholic, which has made compromises on basic doctrines, which therefore have led this faithful astray in their beliefs.
Well, I'm not a Catholic. Can you give me an example?
Example is, for instance, the purpose of marriage.
The purpose of marriage?
Purpose of marriage, yeah. The traditional purpose of marriage, according to the Catholic Church, and up to about 1958, 1960, was the procreation of children. I know it sounds harsh, right? But that was the doctrine and teaching of the Church. Incidentally, there was the fact that married people console each other, communicate with each other in a very special way by marital relations.
Correct.
But since then, the common teaching is that marriage has two purposes. First of all, the celebration of the love of the parents. And then secondarily, the procreation of children. That's not Roman Catholic.
It should be the other way around.
The other way around, of course. That was the tradition. If you want to depart from that, say so, but that's what Catholic doctrine is. Then you take human liberty. The Catholic Church and Christians in general never, in the past, said that you had a right to be wrong in religion, in religious matters.
So a sort of a big tent approach to religion.
That's right. The new teaching, the new persuasion, although it's never been the official teaching of the Church, it's just that it is a wave of opinion that has been adopted by a majority, is that you have a right to be wrong in religious matters.
Mm-hmm.
And that is against the nature of the Church. And then the chief one, the chiefest, if I could put it like that, difference is this, that originally, up to 1965, the Pope was considered to be the head of the Church in the sense that he had absolute power, which he shared with nobody, in religious matters.
Mm-hmm.
Not in secular matters, but in religious matters.
Infallible in religious
Infallible,
matters.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And he alone could dictate in religious matters under certain fixed conditions. He could determine what people should do and believe in religious matters.
Mm-hmm.
That has been changed to saying that he and all the bishops, 4,500 of them, share the absolute power. Together. They're all colleagues. He is first among equals.
Mm.
And this destroys this traditional absolute power of the papacy as the vicar of Christ and as the source of infallible teaching.
So in essence, it seemingly democratizes the Church.
That's right. That's right. And then there are applications all over the place. And the fruit of it all is the tearing to shreds of traditional belief, whether it's the Blessed Sacrament, that is the presence of Christ in the sacrament of the Eucharist, as they call it. Catholics believe, strictly speaking, that here we have the body and the blood and the divinity of Jesus on earth with us by means of the sacrament. The new belief is not like that. It holds that somehow or other we have another type of presence, which is not sacramental. So you go on down the line and you find that a good deal of this 1 billion plus members have been led quietly, unprotestingly, unknowingly into another form of belief which is not Catholic. And now it has come to the point that, you know, students of religion and professors, demographers, religious demographers, those who study large religions like Buddhism, Hinduism, Confucianism, Catholicism, Judaism, Islam, they will say, and it's true, that at any given moment, apart from crises, in any major religion, about 25 to 30% are fully practicing. Mm-hmm. The others pool along. In moments of crisis and war, etc., they come back to the fold. Well, in the Catholic Church today, if you take Europe, ancient Catholic Europe, the average is 5% who even think of going to Mass once a year, or going to confession once a year, or praying regularly.
Well, there are those, Father, who would argue that it is because the Church has not become progressive.
That's right. That's right.
That these numbers are down, that people are rejecting.
That's right.
What has been true.
They would argue that. But you see, what modernization and being progressive has come down to the adulteration and the dilution of these basic dogmas. And that's why the attendance is bad, the practice of faith is bad, and on all the chief moral points on which Catholics were adamantly fixed, like marriage without divorce, contraception, against abortion, against sterilization, against homosexuality, all those points are moot at the present moment in the majority of so-called Catholic lands.
How inside the church did this occur politically?
This occurred politically because for 3 years, between 1962 and 1965, before the majority of people who are listening probably were born, a meeting took place in Rome called the Second Vatican Council. And the people who emerged as the controllers of the discussions, it was attended by all the bishops of the church at that time, and that was roughly 2,800 bishops. The people who controlled their discussions set out to do precisely that. And they were cardinals and bishops and officials. They had these ideas. They had had them for a long time. And by parliamentary stratagems and by very careful assembling of coalitions of votes, they got these doctrines, these new outlooks, voted in as official dogmas and teachings of the Roman Catholic Church. And we had a pope then, Pope Paul VI, who in his weakness went along with them. And that's what happened. And you see, remember this, that Catholics were taught to obey what they were told.
Right.
And suddenly their bishops turn around and say, now you will do this, now you will hold this, now you will believe in this way. And the majority said, all right. Unthinkingly. Besides, the doctrines, the newly formulated doctrines were far easier to observe than the old ones.
There must have been a significant war in the Vatican over all of this.
It was a war to the death. It was a real internecine war between the prelates, between the bishops and the theologians. But the traditionalists, the conservatives, were far less skillful in parliamentary behavior as regards arranging votes and changing men's minds. They were far cleverer than the traditionalists were, so that the conservatives and traditionalists lost out and found themselves completely outmanned and outmaneuvered. And as I say, above all, they had a pope at that time, Pope Paul VI, whom I knew, whom we all knew and liked, who was extremely volatile and was inclined to go along with anything that helped modernize the church, and who made a famous speech in 1965 at the end of this long, vast 3-year meeting, saying that the purpose of the church was to join man in building the human habitat and creating man's paradise on earth. And that art was the first time in its 2 millennia history that the Roman Catholic Church said, look, I am at your service completely to build up a material civilization. That was the death knell of the old organization, which now is agonizing.
Well, you mentioned the severe decline in attendance.
Yes.
Many years have gone under the bridge since this liberalization. If the intent was to bring the flock back, then have we not come far enough to declare it a failure?
Yes, but there is in question here a very, very subtle but real reality, if I speak like that. It is called faith, religious faith. And Catholic doctrine is very, very exact in its teaching about religious faith. It says that if you tamper with your faith, if you, by one compromise or another, you diminish its teaching and are unfaithful to its precepts, you lose it. Now, faith is not a quantum. It's not something sort of you put in a box. It's a dimension of the soul affecting your mind and your will and your memory, and therefore your sensuality, your entire being. If you diminish it to such a point that you compromise its basics, it slowly is dissipated. You can lose your faith. And once you lose it, you don't know you have lost it. You do think the other fellow who is stuck to his faith is a fool. observing things that he needn't observe. But what has happened to you, not you, Art, but what has happened to one, is that one's faith has been diminished to the point of no return. And therefore you don't know you're wrong. In other words, the old principle, if you lose your faith, you don't know you've lost it.
Mm-hmm.
And once you've lost it, there is no guarantee you will ever get it back. No guarantee you will ever realize that once upon a time you did believe in certain truths mordantly and fixedly, and once it's gone, well, now the faith of millions has been affected in basic things like the presence of our Lord Jesus Christ in the sacrament, like the absolute position of the Pope as the only infallible teacher under certain fixed conditions, the nature of marriage, the purpose of man, human liberty. It embraces the entire gamut.
Well, then one must ask, has the Vatican made an irreversible mistake? That's what you seem to be saying.
Yes, the Vatican has made an irreversible mistake as regards the structure of the Church and as regards the way doctrines should be taught. But when we say Vatican, though, you see, Vatican is, we must understand what Vatican is. It is materially, it's a golf-sized area on the bank of the river Tiber in Italy.
Yes.
And there resides the Pope and his officials, about 4,000 or 5,000 of them. That's the Vatican, strictly speaking, and it's in Rome. It's a part of Rome, the capital of Italy. The Vatican, religiously, is this collection of officials and bureaucrats under technically speaking, under the direction of the Pope. Now, but what has happened is that power has been transferred from that bureaucracy and that papal organization to the bishops themselves. They make decisions which the Vatican doesn't like, but it has no longer any power to change.
Well, all right. Father Martin, in Windswept House, you refer
Yes.
to a cardinal, a certain cardinal, not by name.
Yes.
Would that name possibly be Cardinal Casarelli?
He is mirrored there, yes, the character of Cardinal Casaroli. By the way, this cardinal you just mentioned, Casaroli, has just died.
Passed on, yes.
He's passed on, as we say.
So then we can perhaps safely mention his name.
Yes, I think so, with reverence. No matter how different we are in opinion from him, we must give him a certain amount of reverence because he was a prelate.
And what role did he play in these changes?
He played a capital role because he was the equivalent of what you would say the foreign minister and the Secretary of State and chief advisor to at least two popes. And he had tremendous influence in molding the attitude of the Vatican as a power, because it is a power, to the communist empire of the Soviet Union. And then, by derivation, on the ordinary activity of ordinary Catholics. And his view was extremely brilliantly inculcated and practiced, but with disastrous effects. Because, in effect, he accepted the status quo in the Soviet countries, where Catholicism was suppressed,
Mm-hmm.
and where its representatives were imprisoned and killed and tortured. And he was an extremely rigid man as regards devotions and as regards beliefs. He had no use, for instance, for a central belief of Catholics today, which centers around a small town in Portugal called Fatima,
Mm-hmm.
and the revelations of Fatima, and the miracle, which was a genuine miracle by all accounts, in 1917, taking place in Portugal, which is a very influential event in the life of the Church. He was secular-minded compared to his predecessors in that post. And his influence was enormous, enormous.
So then the unnamed cardinal in Windswept House is Cardinal Casarelli.
Yes, to a large extent, the career of Casaroli is mirrored in what we say in the Windswept House about a man called Maestro Yanni.
Mm-hmm.
That was the name that this man had, to a large extent. The effect was disastrous because he implemented the policy of live and let live with the communist regimes and establish relations with them. It was the first time that you'd find a cardinal of the Holy Roman Catholic Church clinking glasses in the Kremlin with those who at that same time were persecuting his fellow co-religionists throughout the Soviet Empire.
Well, going back even further, there was also the sound of clinking glasses with the Nazis, was there not?
Yes, there was. Yes, there was. But that was never the Vatican. The Vatican never clinked glasses with Nazis. There was continual friction because the man in charge of the church at that time was a man called Pacelli, Eugenio Pacelli, better known as Pius XII. And he abhorred the Nazis. And he abhorred fascism as such. And he did his best to condemn them in a very difficult situation. You are probably, a lot of our listeners are acquainted with the controversy about Pius XII, the Pope, but that he ever had any love whatever for Hitler and company is an established fact. He had none ever. And there was no clinking of glasses. Now, individual clergymen did, but they were always reproved by him and, if possible, ousted from their particular location, wherever they were.
If these changes, as you have described, are irreversible within the church,
yes, then
where is the church going?
In one word, underground.
Underground?
Underground, yes. The structure as it is creaking and groaning and not carrying the weight. And there is springing up, both in North America and Latin America and in Europe, a network of Catholics, priests, bishops, nuns, laity, who are reviving all the ancient teachings and living by them and refusing to cooperate with anything they consider to be out of line, anything they consider not to belong to the deposit of the faith, the traditional faith. Now, to be awfully frank with you, Art, and to be frank with all my fellow Catholics throughout the world, at the present moment, that network probably includes, what, about 10 million practicing out of 1 billion. But it is most potent, and the best proof of its potency and its power and its promise is the fact that it is hounded and condemned and excoriated by the officialdom of the Roman Catholic Church.
So then what do you ultimately see occurring? I mean, you've got an underground, a fractional portion of the church.
Right.
Underground. Will it survive? Will it build? Or
it will survive and build and flourish, but in the meantime, the external presence and the influence of the Catholic community, if you can speak of such a thing nowadays, that presence in the public square, in the public market of ideas and organizations, that is going to diminish and be negligible to such an extent that, today, if you examine any country, even North Korea or Albania, two dreadfully distressed lands at the present moment, but in all the other countries anyway, you can safely say there are three components. One is the government. The government is always important nowadays. It used to be, but now it is terribly important. And number two, you have the business community. And the business community in many countries is far more important than the actual government of the elected officials, if the officials are elected. And number three, then you have a gaggle, a rabble of organizations. Everything from the International Firemen's Union to Mothers Against Drunk Driving to the Catholic Church. And they are competing in the public square with diminishing shares going to religion, especially Roman Catholicism, because Roman Catholicism does not belong to the mainstream thought today. And if you examine, for instance, the emerging EU, the European Union,
Yes.
it now has laws that are intolerable for Catholics. Every member of the Union must, according to the laws of EU, the European Union, which is just coming into existence economically and politically, they must have laws promoting abortion, permitting contraception, permitting divorce. They must give equal rights to homosexual marriages. And all these things are unbearable in a world in which Catholicism reigns. But now, as different from 50 years ago, 60 years ago, or 100 years ago, the Catholic Church is just one more member of these NGOs, non-governmental organizations, competing in the public square, with decreasing returns because the doctrine does not fit modernization. Now, what is the future? The future is a diminishing socio-political and socio-cultural effect of Catholics, the dispelling of anything like a potent Catholic community, and the existence of Catholicism in its traditional form underground, in the sense that it's private and practiced quasi in secret and out of the public view because the public doesn't like it. And there will always be, not always, but there will be for quite a long time, a public facade in which there is a group of officials, bishops, priests, all the way up to the papacy, who will maintain the exterior facade, but the power will be gone. Interestingly enough, the future of the papacy is different because of the power that the papacy exerts as a center. But that's a wider question.
Yeah, it will be. You're saying it will be different, or is different in.
It really will belong to the mainstream. There will be very little difference between it and the other component members of the socio-political body.
Are you suggesting the Pope has been reduced to nothing much more than a figurehead?
Yes, I am. That is what I am saying, and that is the fact. That is in actual effect on politics and on culture. There no longer is really a Catholic influence in this country, or in North America, or in Latin America. There's no longer any real influence at all. And it's a diminishing influence that they do exert, and every year brings defeat after defeat after defeat. For instance, take a very common example, a very prevalent example, Art. There's a play called Corpus Christi by a playwright, very well known, Terence McNally, Irish origin, of course. It is the plot is roughly that you have a central figure called Joshua, which is Jesus, and he has 12 disciples, and he has homosexual relations with those disciples in the play. Now, for the Roman Catholic doctrine, for Roman Catholic believers, this is blasphemy. And yet there is no way Roman Catholics can stop this, can get it removed. The more they talk about it, the more publicity they give it. And that is the big difficulty, that there no longer is any respect, veneration for central doctrines of the Roman Catholic Church.
Well then, Father, if all of this is true, and so much of the world is Catholic, in name at least,
nominally,
then what effect would you imagine this to have on society in general? It's a much broader question. If we're going to be accepting now the unacceptable previously, how will this change society, or is that already underway?
That's already underway, Art. And the effect is a diminishing return in moral influence.
In other words, what is said by the Church is no longer carries the weight it once did.
That's right. That's right. For instance, there's no doubt about it that the majority of Catholics in Northern Ireland are believers. Everybody seems to accept this. It is true. But in no way has that really influenced politics. No more than the Protestantism of the Orange men their counterparts in Northern Ireland, has that influenced their morality?
Yeah, what a mess over there right now.
A real mess. But the point I'm making is that neither the Catholic Church nor the Protestant Church has any influence over the behavior either of the IRA, the Irish, or the Catholics, or the Protestants.
So then, minus this influence, what effect do you see it having on society?
A destabilizing effect, because look, in the absolute order, supposing imaginatively, in our imaginations now, Art, you and I and our listeners, we wipe out the existence of the Catholic Church. There no longer is the Catholic Church existing in this hypothesis.
Right.
No pope, no bishops, no cathedrals, no churches, no religious orders, no schools, no academies, no institutes, no influence. They belong to museums. If you do that, if such a happening did take place, a black hole would appear in human society, because the Catholic Church, culturally, socio-culturally, through its religious influence and its religious monuments and its religious tradition, does exercise a restraining hand. If that's gone, then all demographers I know say it will be catastrophic, completely catastrophic. Just as if, for instance, in Arab lands, from Algeria to Indonesia, Islam suddenly disappeared, there would be chaos, because religion does, whether it's Islam or Catholicism, in their particular lands, do introduce a socio-cultural balance.
Mm-hmm.
And that is why the real enemies of the Roman Catholic Church, and the Roman Catholic Church has real enemies, never wanted to destroy the organization. It's too valuable as a socio-cultural and socio-political stabilizer. They want to control it.
If it no longer has that value, then will the same restriction on its destruction remain?
Yes, it will. It will. And of course, nobody can predict the future. Nobody can say what is going to happen in 2020, 2030, 2050, and 3000. We don't know even if we will attain that age for the church or for the human race. If we will go through most of the next millennium, we don't know. But we can safely say certain things, that the diminishing return of the influence of anything like a Catholic community bodes a terrible absence in social and political life.
Are we to imagine at some point homosexual priests? Are we to imagine the ending of the institution of marriage as we have known it? Are we to imagine a church that will accept anybody's conception of God and religion and how it was and how it is?
Art, we have it already. To a large extent, we have it already. In certain dioceses, for instance, in the United States, the diocese being the locality governed by a bishop, there are married priests living with their families.
Yes.
In contravention of the law of the Church of Celibacy. There are homosexual priest organizations here and abroad, and in Latin America. There are women priests, that is, that women who have undergone ordination ceremonies and who faithfully say what they call Mass every so often, investments with the chalice, etc., with the usual accoutrements of a Roman Mass. There are bishops who openly flaunt the authority of the Pope and the basic dogmas of the Church. We're well on our way. There is, too, which we must keep on saying, there is a large body of Catholics of that 1 billion plus membership, a large number of Catholics who groan beneath this, who know it's wrong, but who can't do anything about it. Because, again, the organization of the Church is very tight. And if you start at the Pope and go down to the smallest little parish priest stuck away in the smallest little parish, you will find that in no position of authority, anywhere in that vast network of organizations of bishops and priests and organizations and committees and dioceses and parishes, in no place is there one traditionalist. They have all been outed and ousted.
Outed and ousted.
Yep. So the prognosis is bad from the point of view of socio-political presence and socio-cultural influence. Now, what will happen after that is one can hypothesize, but that's the situation.
And that's really the purpose of Windswept House as a book, to expose all of that.
That's right, Windswept House. And it took place in the 20 years, chiefly in the 20 years of Pope John Paul II, whom many people describe as a conservative.
You're on the air with Father Malachi Martin. Hi.
Good morning. How are you?
Okay, sir. Where are you?
I'm in Hayward, California.
Okay.
I was reading the book, The Decline and Fall of the Roman Church.
Roman Church, yes.
And one question I had in that, where you had thought that by the year 2000, let me quote it here, that there will no longer be a religious institution recognizable as the Roman Catholic Church of today.
We're almost there.